Hello once again, it's Michael here from silversurfertraveller.com. Today I thought I'd talk about things to do and places to go in Porto, the second largest city in Portugal. For all the places I've mentioned, I will put details and links in the description below. The first place I want to talk about is a place called Crystal Palace Gardens, or Jardim do Palácio de Cristal. The Crystal Palace Gardens is a beautiful park with various tiered gardens, with some having peacocks, chickens, geese as well as ducks wandering around. At first you might think that's all there is to see, but as you walk around further along you get to see breathtaking views across the River Douro and of the city of Porto. Now, anyone that knows me knows that I love my food, and I'll tell you something, walking through that park certainly builds up an appetite. Luckily for me, just across the road from the Crystal Palace Gardens is a little restaurant called Churrasqueira Palacio Restaurant. I think that's how it's pronounced anyway. It really does some tasty grub. I had a starter, a main, vegetables, fries, a massive great big jug of sangria, and it was only 15 euros. Sticking with the subject of food, a good way to see what Porto has to offer is to go on a food tasting tour. Now, while I was there, I booked one on Airbnb that was hosted by a really nice couple called Arthur and Mata. I'll put the links below in the description so you can, if you're in town, you could contact them. We ate at a Tasca in Campania. A Tasca is a small traditional Portuguese restaurant that's normally frequented by local people. It's a bit like a Greasy Spoon Cafe in London. You won't normally find them on the usual tourist routes. I mean, I've got to say that the food and drink on the tour was fantastic. We had bolinhos de bacalhau, which is codfish cake, rosas, which is deep fried croquettes, salada de bacalhau, which again is cod salad, and there was lots and lots more. The food tour also took in some of the nearby places where I learned about the local history of the area. For around about 35 quid, I reckon it was a real bargain. Sticking with the touring theme, the next thing I want to talk about is a street art tour. In the UK, when you think about street art, the name Banksy probably comes first, second and fourth. In Porto, however, there are many well-known street artists, and taking a street tour that explored a lot of the work and also the dynamic between the local government of Porto and collectives and individual artists was really fascinating. Popular street artists like Guatemala, who's French, Costa, Vils, Mr. Deo and Hazul were invited by the local government to enhance the image of Porto by transforming some of the neglected buildings and spaces around the city into really vibrant, colourful canvases. I booked a tour that was hosted by a guy called Miguel. It took around 3 hours, and what I'd say is that because the tour lasted around about 3 hours, and Porto is a pretty hilly place, if it's something that interests you, I'd advise that you wear comfortable shoes, as you're going to be walking quite a fair bit. The next place of interest I'd like to talk about is called the Porto Cathedral. I think it's Sé de Porto in Portuguese. Now, if you like historical monuments, you'll love the Porto Cathedral. It was originally built around about the 12th century. It's been renovated and rebuilt numerous times since then. I mean, basically that explains why it's really a curious mix of different architectural styles. The cathedral itself is in a place called Batala. It's not far from São Bento train station, and it's very close to the walls that once protected the city of Porto from attack. One interesting fact that you might like to know is that there's a column in the middle of the square at the cathedral, and that's where criminals in Porto were hanged in the past. Standing on the square gives you a really magnificent view of the city, the Douro River and wine cellars on the waterfront across the river. Entry to the cathedral itself is free, although if you want to go into the cloisters and the Bishop's Palace, it will cost you around about €5. The next place I'd like to talk about is São Bento train station itself. A train station, I hear you ask. Well, yes, a train station. But one thing you need to know, this is no ordinary train station, or as Marks and Spencer's would say, this is São Bento train station. São Bento was opened to the public in 1916. It was on a site of a former Benedictine monastery. It's known for its magnificent tiled artwork. Azulejos, I think they are called in Portuguese. The artwork is throughout the station, and it's got to be one of the most beautiful train stations in Europe. Now, if you're in Porto, then a trip to the Porto wine cellars on the other side of the Douro River shouldn't be missed. In the true spirit of discovery, I mean, what better way is there to explore a place than to do it sampling the local brew and soaking up the local history at the same time? You'll get regular tours of the many wine cellars where you can learn more about the history, find out and taste samples of the different types of port. In fact, some of the most famous brands in the world have wine cellars here. Brands like Sandyman, Taylor's, Offley, for example. No trip to Porto would be complete without visiting Ribeira. From visiting the Casa do Infante, the birthplace of Henry the Navigator, taking the Six Bridges cruise along the river, or having breakfast at Largo de São Domingos, there are a multitude of things to do and see in the most famous district in Porto. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video about things to do and places to see in Porto, and I'll put some links with more information down below. If you haven't done so already, please click on the like button and subscribe to my channel for more travel information and tips for young people over the age of 50.